I've been working on my own Wii emulator for about 4 years now, just as a side project for fun. And let me tell you, it's had quite a fun assortment of graphical issues. Like, for example, these pokies. Or, wait, this is one of my favorites. In Super Mario Galaxy, none of the characters have any eyeballs. And I could show you literally tons more. But the one I want to talk to you about today is the trophy from Mario Kart Wii. So picture this, I finally get Mario Kart Wii booting and running, and I'm just scrambling to get in game to see what that looks like. So I'm spam clicking, going to one player, going to see what happens, and I get this. Literally, how does this even happen? So I decided to take a closer look by comparing my trophy with the one rendered by Dolphin, the most mature Wii emulator, and theirs looks a lot better. So I looked into how the game decides to render this trophy, and I found something odd. The game is providing this texture to be used to render the trophy. That does not look right at all. There's no way a picture of 4 bubbles that are pink and green will somehow turn into that. That doesn't make any sense. Dolphin, what texture do you get? And now I'm just completely baffled, like, what is going on? It's almost as if Shigeru Miyamoto went outside, found some random kid blowing bubbles, snapped a picture, and went, oh yeah, that'll make a great trophy. And somehow it worked. So let's take a deep dive together and figure out how Mario Kart Wii manages to pull this off. Before that trophy makes sense, let's take a look at a simpler example. Pay attention to what happens to King Boo as I enter the cave. You're blue now. No, not that kind of blue. But how does this even work? Well, to figure that out, let's strip King Boo of all his colors and see how the game tells the GPU to color in the bottle. The very first thing the GPU asks for is something known as the ambient color. This is basically a color that acts as a global tint on the entire model. In this case, painting King Boo in turquoise, likely to reflect the bluish color of the cave he's in. The next thing the GPU does is apply a directional light to the model. In this case, a faint shine of light coming from the bottom of the map. Now we can actually take a peek under the hood to see exactly how directional lighting works. The game provides something known as normal vectors to the model. These are the little blue arrows that you see. The normal vectors tell the GPU, hey, this part of the model faces in this direction. Well, why is this useful? Let's take a look. You can notice that the red arrows are pointing downwards and the blue arrows are pointing upwards. So what the GPU does, well, it knows the light's coming from the bottom, and so the direction of the arrows tells the GPU how much light that part of the model will experience. Now this is a weird effect. If you look at the bottom of King Boo, well, the GPU decided that that part of the model should be entirely white because it's facing the light. But in reality this doesn't make sense because the bike should be covering King Boo. But the GPU on the Wii is not that fancy. Let's throw that away. The next thing the GPU does is it adds some hard-coded shading to the model that makes everything pop and look beautiful. And finally, we're on to texturing. The game provides the GPU these specific textures to be used to color in the model. Basically, each point in the model says, hey, I want to use this part of this texture. You can also see this effect in Bowser's Castle, where the game uses an ambient color of red and a light color of yellow. Or in Moonview Highway, where the ambient color and the light color are both a bluish white, until you enter the tunnel, where there's a bit of yellow involved. But how is any of this related to the trophy? To figure that out, let's bring the trophy back into view and do the same process. It turns out that the game applies an ambient color to the trophy too, a faint gray this time. And then, it adds a faint directional light pointing towards the right. But still, this is a far cry away from what the actual trophy looks like. And this is where the bubbles come into play. So, you see on the left that I've provided the normal vectors, and this is necessary to understand what is happening. Let us replace the texture of the bubbles with a gradient from orange to blue. Do we notice anything? We should notice that anywhere where the arrows are pointing upwards generally tends to be orange, and anywhere where the arrows point downwards tends to be more blue. This isn't universally the case, but in the parts of the trophy that are shiny, that are really shiny, yeah, that's true. And it's kind of weird. Why is that true? Well, let's rotate the texture and see what happens now. We notice the exact same thing. Anywhere where the normal vectors are more left, it's more orange, and anywhere where they're pointing right, it's more blue. But what does this mean? Well, the game has done something clever here. Instead of mapping the texture onto the model like it does for King Boo, oh hey, this part of the mesh should use this part of the texture. This time, the game has configured the GPU to use the normal vectors to figure out what part of the texture to use. This is a technique known as matcap. So look back at the bubbles, right? What the GPU is doing is it's saying, hey, the direction the surface is facing, that direction should choose the texture color. What this is doing is it's saying the bubble texture is basically a cheat for shininess. The normal vector is asking, hey, if this part of the trophy were a tiny bubble facing in this direction, what color would it be? And so what this means is the trophy ends up stealing the shininess from the bubbles and mapping it onto this metallic surface, creating this beautiful masterpiece. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that brief foray into Mario Kart Wii's rendering process. I plan on making more videos, maybe explaining things like Super Mario Galaxy Skybox, or talking about ludicrous bugs that I found in Dolphin, or maybe even just deep dives into how emulators work. I know way too much about this console and about emulators in general, so if there's any parts of Wii or emulation that you're particularly interested in, feel free to comment. Bye for now!